Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Prince Larmy Jarbo, and this is the 1847 show. You're watching another lesson of our third series on making money moves. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about debt management. How do you manage your debt? Or what is debt management? We have a lot of information to cover today. It's very exciting because these are the things that when we were growing up, we did not learn. So this is an opportunity for you to do just that. So stay tuned. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Bosco baby, B to the O, S to the C, O, straight out of China. I represent LIB. The song playing in the background is my latest single called Like It or Not. You can find me on social, especially YouTube at Bosco underscore LIB, and also on Instagram at Bosco underscore LIB, and also on Facebook at Bus Music. Right now, you're watching the 1847 show. You know it's about you and me and all things Liberian. So follow the 1847 show on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and also on formerly Twitter and now X. So let's go, 2024. See
Hello, my name is Grace Joma Baba, founder of Destiny Creative Organization and owner at Janice Snacks. You are watching the 1847 show. The 1847 show celebrates you, me, and all things like you. Follow the 1847 show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The 1847 show, all things like you.
So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Again, this is the 1847 show, and I'm your host, Prince Larmy Jarbo. This is our Making Money Moves segment where we talk about basic financial literacy to help our members and viewers understand these topics and improve their financial lives. So today we're talking about debt management, specifically how do you manage debt effectively? How do you avoid bad debt and use these strategies to build a better financial future for yourself? So the first question then becomes, what is debt management, right? So, or what is debt? Because you got to know what debt is before you can manage it. So, debt is pretty much money that you borrow and you have to repay, often with interest. So, if you don't know what debt management is, there is a lot of opportunity for you to get yourself into some good trouble because when you borrow money, it isn't free money most often, and you have to pay it back. And you have to have that understanding, basic understanding of debt management to be able to pay it back in an effective way so that it doesn't cost you other harms in the future. So we have good debts and we have bad debts. But typically when we hear the word debts, it always rings a bad bell, which if you do not manage debt properly, all debts can become bad debts. So, but firstly, we're going to talk about the good debts. So, good debts are debts that essentially give you some type of income or return on your investment, right? Or either that or it's adding value to you or something else over time. So, for example, A good debt is a loan that you take for your business. Why is that a good debt? It's a good debt because it generates income. It adds value to you. So when you do the business, you get money to repay the loan, and you also have money to do other things. So that is a good debt. And then another example of a good debt is when you take out money for education. Now, immediately, you're not going to be able to earn income from your education, but in the future, after that value has been added through your education, you can then earn some income. So when you take out debts for purposes like that, those are considered good debts. And typically, we want to have good debts. But regardless if a debt is good or a debt is bad, you still have to know how to manage it because a good debt can become bad debt if mishandled or mismanaged. So then what is a bad debt? A bad debt is completely the opposite, right? It's anything that does not give you any return on your investment. It does not add any value to you. So these type of debts, for example, includes debt when you take out that you take out to go and get your if you're a guy to get the latest shoes. If you're a girl, this is a debt you might take out to get the latest hair, Brazilian hair. You don't need it to survive. It's not an essential, but you're taking these things out to buy luxury items, maybe the latest iPhone or a laptop. And then you have to repay those loans back with interest. So those are bad debts. Even an interest-free debt can be a bad debt if you do not need it, if it's not adding any value to you. Just because someone gives you money and says, hey, don't pay me interest, just pay the principal, doesn't mean that it is a good debt. If you're using it for a good cause like a business, it could be a good debt. Now, let's talk a little bit about principal and interest, right? So a principal is the amount of money given to you. So if I credit you $10, the principal is $10. Now, interest, on the other hand, is different. Interest is the cost of loaning or borrowing money. So if I credit you $10 and I say the cost or the interest rate is 10%, then that tells you that the cost of borrowing that $10 is 10% or $1 in this case, because 10% of $10 is $1. So when you repay the debt, you're going to give me back the principal, $10, and the interest, $1. So a total of $11. So we know what debt is, and we know what good debts and bad debts are, what principal and interest are. Now, what is debt management? Well, debt management is pretty much a strategy that you use to manage your debt, to pay them back as you promised, and to make sure that it does not overtake your finances and you're able to still do or live up to other obligations in your life, right? So, some of the common things that people take out debts for include education, as I mentioned, for their kids, for themselves. Also, a lot of people take out loans for emergencies. And this is why we emphasize in our previous segments is only take out emergencies, money for emergencies when you need it. But typically what you want to do is when you're not in an emergency is to save for those emergencies, right? So have an emergency fund. We talked about the 50-30-20 rule. So 50% of your income goes to your essentials, which are your needs. 30% goes to your non-essentials, which are your wants. And then 20% goes to your savings. And a part of that can be for emergencies. So save for emergencies when you're not in an emergency. It's best because when you are, then you already have the money to support that. And people also take out loans for their families, to support their families, to meet community obligations, so many other things. But regardless of what the reason is that you're taking out a debt, is you have to know and understand debt management. So the first thing is we're assuming that you have debt. This is why you're interested in this video, or you might get into debt. There's a point where I took a debt management class and I didn't have any debt. And then, interestingly, I got into debt a few months later or a year or so later. And then I already had the knowledge to repay that debt. So then I was able to repay it and get out of it. Now I'm somewhat debt free, right? So even if you don't have debt right now, my point is this is still good information for you. So the first thing you want to do when you're managing your debt is to list all of your debts. This includes any loans from the banks, any community susu that you're in, any money that you owe your family, any money that you owe any mobile money services like Lone Star, what is it, Orange Money, MTN mobile money, whatever you owe, is you want to list them. And I recommend that you list them in order from the highest debt to the lowest debt. And the reason you want to list them in order is because we're going to talk about prioritizing your debt, right? So list them in order. The highest amount. What is the highest amount that you owe? And then go down. And then total all of them. Because you want to have an idea on your total obligations, the total amount that you owe. And then once you list all your debts, the next thing you want to do is analyze all your debts. Analyze them, analyze the terms. And the ways that you do this is to understand the interest rate. So how much extra do you have to pay? We talk about interest rate. That's the cost of borrowing money. So on each loan, how much extra do you have to pay? And then also analyze the repayment schedule because each of those are going to have different repayment terms. Do you have to pay weekly on some of them? Do you have to pay monthly? Is it annually? There's also another option that you might not be familiar with that can be very good or very detrimental depending on who is managing the debt. And that is the lump sum option, where you have to pay the money at one time. Everything that you owe has to be repaid at one time. So that needs to be very carefully handled. So you analyze the interest rate, you analyze the repayment plans, and then the penalties. What penalties do you have to incur if you do not pay these loans on time? If you do not pay the minimum amount, what happens? Is your house going to be taken away? Are there any other collaterals that are going to be taken away? And the collateral is just something of value that you exchange, or you told the bank that if I don't pay this money, or anyone, if I don't pay this money, I'm willing, or you have the right, the legal right to take away this collateral, this thing of value. So analyze the penalties as well, so you can be familiar with how to go on to the next part of this, which is to categorize your debt. That's step 3, categorize your debt. And you want to do this into 2 categories. You want to put aside your high interest debt and your low interest debt. So the high interest debts are going to go in the category called high priority debt. So these are debt with high interest loans. These are debts with severe penalties. And the thing with your high interest debt, and the reason you want to categorize them, is because you want to put emphasis and focus on that to pay it off faster. You need to pay these off first. And then your low priority debts are going to be debts that are interest free or very low interest and very minimum penalties. So you have listed all your debts, you've analyzed your debts, and you've categorized your debts as high priority or low priority. What's next? Now, you create a repayment plan. And the way you do that is you dedicate, firstly, a fixed amount of your salary to that repayment of those loans, of those debts. Typically, as we said, it's 20% of your income. But if you're in a very severe situation, you might need to crank that up to 50% and cut down on some of your needs, or some of your wants. Because we have 30% that is allocated to your wants. You might need to cut that down and reallocate that money to your debts to repay them faster. Because the faster you can get out of debt, the more free you are. So when you create that debt repayment budget, is you also want to dedicate that fixed income, that fixed amount that you're going to use to repay that debt. And notice how I didn't say all of your income, because you don't want to repay the debt and then give yourself reasons to go and get into debt because you can't meet your basic needs, right? So if the amount that you have to allocate to your debts is not enough, then you need to renegotiate the terms with your lenders. Hey, I have these other debts that I have to take care of. Is it okay if I reduce the term from this to this, or the amount from this to this, because I need to be able to meet my other needs and obligations? Now, typically, if you communicate in advance before the debt is due, people are going to be flexible. Why? Because every lender wants their money to be repaid. And if you're saying you're willing to repay it just at a different pace, they might initially be upset, but then they have to understand that you're willing to repay. It's just not, it might just not happen as fast as they want. So most likely than not, they're going to be willing to come up with some type of negotiation with you. And then the next thing you want to do is, after you create that repayment plan, negotiate the terms, so on, you also want to utilize the debt snowball method. And this method is pretty much you understanding first how a snowball works. So snowball, if it's up the hill and you create this ball, you just mold up some snow and let it roll down the hill. Well, as it goes down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger. And the idea when you use that in terms of debt is to pay off the smallest amount of your debt first. So if you have three different debts and one of them is 3,000 and the another is 5,000 and the other is 10,000, then focus on paying 3,000 first. Because what's going to happen is, once that is paid off, you're going to build this sense of achievement, sense of motivation, right? And accomplishment. Makes you more excited. Oh, I have 1 out of 3 down, 2 to go. You get excited. You want to do more because you can see the actions, right? So then, once you've paid off the 3,000, the next goal is to take all of the money from the 3,000 and apply it to the next highest debt, which is 5,000. So you're going to take all of those funds and start applying it to the next debt. It's fast when you do it right, and it's effective. But one thing you got to be cautioned about is, given the penalties and the interest rate on each of those, you want to prioritize paying off your high interest debts, or paying the minimum amount on your high interest debts first. Because they're high priority, right? And they have a lot of penalties associated. So you want to prioritize those as well. But yeah, pretty much that's the debt snowball method. The next thing you want to do now is, as you're, restructuring your debts, don't take on new debts unless it's an emergency. Do not take on new debts. If you do not need it, don't take on new debts. And if you're heavily reliant on debt, then maybe you need to budget. Maybe you need to watch our other videos that talk about how do you budget on any income. You can still budget or save more money so that you don't have to be in a situation like that. So that's pretty much it. That is debt management 101, like many of our courses we offer here. So what is the key takeaway? The key takeaway is that managing debt effectively requires planning, prioritization, and discipline. And those don't come easy. They come to those who want it the most. Your homework is for you now to go back, if you have debts, and list all of your debts. List all of your debts and analyze the terms. And we talked about the ways you can do this. Look at the interest rate, look at the penalties and the repayment terms. And then categorize your debts into high priority and low priority. Come up with a repayment to start paying those off using methods like the debt snowball method. So those are the recap. And your engagement is now, I know 1 or 2 people that can benefit from this material. So this is the opportunity for you to share that. So thank you for watching. And you've been watching Series 3, Lesson 3 on Making Money Moves. I've been your host, Prince Larmin Jarbo. Until next time, God bless you and God bless our beautiful Mama Liberia. Stay blessed.